Well, soccer fans, thanks for coming back to another edition of our team previews. We continue rolling along in this episode with FC Cincinnati. FC Cincinnati, as you all know, had a very successful USL, several years in the USL before being granted the MLS expansion franchise, and last year came into the league with a lot of hype and a lot of promise, and a roster that Mike and I thought could actually make some noise in the MLS, a roster we thought could score some goals in the MLS. Unfortunately, it was a roster that did none of those things. So FC Cincinnati is really looking to rebound from a historically bad performance last year in the MLS. And in doing so, they've brought in a number of new players through different deals and signings, and a lot of turnover. A lot of guys going out from Cincinnati. So, Mike, you got to look at this roster in detail. Who sticks out to you? Who is gone, and who's going to make a new impact for Cincinnati here?
Yeah, so players out. Start with the guys that are out. We've got Namzi Al Badawi, Victor Ulloa, Corbin Bone, Justin Hoyt, Roland Lama, Forrest Lasso, Emmanuel Ledesma, Derek Etienne Jr., Alvis Powell, Leo Bertone, Fernando Adi, Jimmy Haig, Ben Lund, Logan Gadula, and Hassan Nadam. Now, the last couple there, Ben Lund and Hassan Nadam were loaned out, so not they're still technically FC Cincinnati property. However, some of the names that really stand out to me is Roland Lamar. He definitely did not live up to the expectation when they got him from Dallas, to be on that expansion team. As well, Corbin Bone, he was a guy who had been with Cincinnati for a long time, so that that one of the USL players that came up. Victor Ulloa as well is an interesting name there. But some of the players in got Harris Medunjanin from the Philadelphia Union. The midfielder picked him up on waivers. Also, defender Zico Bailey, a homegrown. Saad Abdul Salam through the reentry draft. Tom Pedersen, a free transfer. Yuya Kubo, the transfer from KAA Ghent, who is one of the designated players. Goalkeeper Bobby Edwards. Forward Jurgen Locadia from Brighton Hove and Albion over in the Premier League, another DP signing for Cincinnati. And Adrian Regatin, the 28-year-old Moroccan who started at Toulouse over in League One in France, Ligue 1, and did okay. And he's been bouncing around the Turkish league since, and now has apparently found a home with FC Cincinnati. So a lot of movement in, a lot of movement out. What are your thoughts on all of that movement, Nick?
Well, first of all, the one name that really jumps out to me, Emmanuel Ledesma. This guy has been playing soccer all over the world, never really found a long-term home. Just go look up his credentials, like even just a quick Wikipedia page search. His list of clubs is this long. He's been all over the place for so many years. Thought he finally found a home in FC Cincinnati. He was a fan favorite. He endeared himself to the people of the city when they were in USL, and it was a lot of chatter on social media and around the Cincinnati community when his option got declined and was seen that he was going to part ways. So he's going to be a big emotional hole for FC Cincinnati to fill. But you know what? It might have been necessary for the club to move on from him if they were going to say, look, we're in MLS now. We're not in USL. We got to do things differently. We got to have much higher standards. Not to say that the USL has low standards, but when you're competing with teams like Atlanta and DC and New York and payrolls and international players like that, you got to clear up some roster spots and maximize every bit of it. So on the one hand, it's sad to see Ledesma go, but on the other hand, hopefully it leads to Cincinnati all the more improving their roster. Harris Medunjanin is a name that stands out. We've known him from Philadelphia and that he was picked up on waivers. So you see that there's a little roster turnover in Philly, and hopefully FC Cincinnati can take advantage of that. But yeah, you're right. Regatin and Kubo, these are guys that have to come in, make an immediate impact. Kubo transferring from Ghent. There was another player that you know of, Mike, who came in from Ghent, I think, and didn't do too bad. Or was that Genk?
That was Genk. Yeah,
Genk.
you're getting Pozuelo for TFC confused there. Ghent, though, is the club that the up and coming striker for the Canadian men's national team, Jonathan David, plays for. So that, there's another name that's been linked a little bit to MLS circles just because of his, Canadian background there. So, but yeah, Ghent is a decent club. I'm excited to see what Kubo can bring, and as well Medunjanin. I think one of the best pickups for this club was Harris Medunjanin. He had a great season for Philly. I was really surprised that Philly let him go and put him onto the waivers for FC Cincinnati to pick up. I think he's a very good connector in the midfield, and he's got a lethal left foot. I mean, the guy can shoot from distance. He can hit free kicks well. He brings more than just that midfield player. So excited about that. But really, some of the DPs that I want to talk a little bit about. Yuya Kubo. Not a lot of people know much about this guy in MLS circles. I know I didn't. But looking, doing some research and finding out, he just transferred from KAA Ghent, as we spoke of, went on loan to Nuremberg in Bundesliga, only had 1 goal in 22 appearances. So wasn't doing too hot there. An article from MLS Multiplex, a journalist that covers Ghent, stated that he has the potential on the football level, but there's personal clashes regarding culture and character that have been difficult for him to overcome, stating like that he doesn't really do well with the media, and that to me is a bit of a concern, because here in MLS you do hear a lot of the players that come over from Europe saying, man, this media exposure over here is nuts. Like, these guys come into the locker room. Media doesn't go into the locker rooms over in Europe. Now, mind you, there's more media coverage in Europe because it's more of a football and soccer crazy media, but they don't get the same type of access as they do in MLS. I know that was something, as a TFC fan, there was a lot in the news about Javinko when he first came over. He was like, what is going on here? Why are these guys in the locker room looking at me when I just got out of the shower? Like, what's going on? So that might not bode well for Kubo. But I think that if Cincinnati manages it correctly, they could get that overcome, and hopefully he'll do well. Nick, why don't you tell us a little bit about Jurgen Locadia?
Sure. So he is a transfer from Brighton Hove Albion over in the Premier League. So the guy has a really good experience from the Premier League. Also, he's Dutch, so you know that he has a decent, as far as national background, and has played with the Netherlands youth national teams since the U17 level. He's 26 now, hasn't gotten any senior team call-ups, but you saw that the potential was there and that the Dutch team decided to make an investment in him, at least at the youth levels. He had a couple years with PSV in their youth program, and then spent 7-8 seasons with their senior team. So he's got talent. He's had an excellent career in the Netherlands, and then spent a year with Brighton Hove Albion in 2018 to the present. Been out on loan a little bit in 1899 Hoffenheim in the Bundesliga, and now is on loan here at FC Cincinnati. So that's a little bit about his pedigree. So you know that he comes from a good soccer background. Now it's just going to be, how does that translate to the MLS? He's in his prime. He's 26 years old. He's an offensive-minded player. They list him as a striker, but he's often playing on the wing. Goals are something that he can come by. He can handle the goal scoring for his team. If you're looking at his club career, he's played in approximately 170 club games and has about 50 or so goals. So he's scoring about every third game. And I think if he can take that kind of pace and bring it over to the MLS, I mean, he has the chance to, bag 10, 12, 15 goals this season and really step up the attack for Cincinnati that was lacking from last year. So, again, great pedigree, coming into the prime of his career as far as his age goes, and has a knack for finding the back of the net. Like, what more do you want out of one of your DPs?
Yeah, absolutely. The third DP listed on FC Cincinnati's site is Alan Cruz. However, there is some rumors out there that they're looking to bring in a number 10. So I'm assuming as that third designated player. So I'm assuming that they would be able to buy him down with allocation money. That's kind of why he's still listed as a DP as of right now, but he might not be if they find somebody like a number 10. I think they're looking at Regaton, the new signing, to come in and possibly be that number 10. And if that doesn't work out, then kind of spend some money in the summertime going after that. So those are the three DPs for right now. And again, there's a little bit of flexibility there, so that's good for good for Cincinnati. Um, I'm excited to see what Locadia can do because if you're playing for a club in the Premier League, you've got talent. And there is a huge disparity between the Premier League and MLS, as we all know. And if you don't think so, you're kidding yourselves. So to see this guy come over, he should be able, if you're saying if he's scoring in those better leagues over in Europe, about a goal every 3 games, that's going to improve in MLS. The standard of play isn't there. So you're going to see more of an increase in the goal scoring for him. And to me, that's what makes him the most important player for Cincinnati. This is probably their biggest name outside of Kubo. And I think a guy that has Premier League experience has got to translate into, a great player for this club in order for this club to improve on the season that it had last year, which really there's only one way to go, and that's up for Cincinnati. So I'm excited to see what Locadia can bring, and I'm expecting a lot of goals as well. I'm thinking a lot of goals and some assists. And you're saying he can play on the wing, kind of cut in a little bit. That can definitely help. The goal scoring and the assists as well for him. So those are my thoughts on the most important player for Cincinnati. Nick, do you agree?
Kind of. I mean, if you want to pick one guy, then yeah, you want to find your striker, and we've talked about the importance of goal scoring in the MLS, but I'm going to take a little different approach and say the most important unit for FC Cincinnati is going to be their back line. It's going to be their defenders. They let in a record number of goals against last season in MLS. They had a historically bad performance, and it really just derailed everything that they were trying to do. And I think maybe the coaching staff that started that season didn't pay enough attention to the defense or just didn't know how to handle opposing MLS clubs. Whatever the case may be, it's a new season. They've got new players. They've got new coaches. So I'm going to have to put a lot of pressure on the FC Cincinnati defensive squad here. I think they're going to be most important to the team. We've got names like Matthew Deplagne, Nick Hagland, Kendall Waston, Vanderwerf. These are guys who either have played in other respectable leagues around the world or have a lot of MLS experience. Hagland, Waston, to be precise. Waston, he even gets involved on the offense. You see him in the middle of the box when there's any sort of set pieces, just due to his 6'5", 235 frame. So you know what you're going to get from those guys. I want to see Deplagne take the next step. Want to see what Greg Garza can do. And then Andrew Gutman, a homegrown player from right around the corner from us in Hinsdale, Illinois. Let's see if he can actually take a step. He had a lot of buzz around him. I think he came up through the Fire Academy. They loaned him out overseas to Celtic, and then there was some big snafu with how he was loaned out and was going to end up being loaned back to an MLS team or something like that. And the Chicago Fire all got upset about it. And the MLS got all upset about it because it looked like they were getting around roster rules and things. And he was playing in the USL, and now he's ended up with FC Cincinnati, considered a homegrown for them. Like it's a crazy story. I can't do it justice here on the podcast. Like, you'll have to go read the articles on it, but he has a lot of potential. He had a lot of hype around him. So he's a guy who hopefully gets some time. And on a team like FC Cincinnati, second year in the league, where the defense was just the worst in league history last year, he should get minutes, and we should see him develop a little bit. So for me, again, it's not so much the most important player, but it's going to be the most important unit, the defensive back line.
No, I see where you're going with that, and with that season they had last year, I agree with you. That's very important. So You were talking a bit about Gutman, and I wanted to kind of throw him into our next segment, the breakout youngsters. However, I don't know, I can't see him breaking out more than a couple other guys that are on my list here. I've got Frankie Amaya, the first overall pick from the Super Draft last year. He is in his second season, and he's a Generation Adidas guy. Now, we've talked about it a lot in these team previews, and I'm really banking on these Generation Adidas guys that are in their second season to break out, because if they don't, it's going to make me look really bad. So I'm going with him to be. He got 15 starts last season, so a good number. He got a little bit of playing time under his belt. Now this year, I think he'll take that next step in the midfield. U20 team member for United States youth national team, so he's got that experience as well. So I'm expecting big things from Frankie Amaya, really, to take that next step. Also, Brandon Vasquez, so the 21-year-old from Atlanta via Nashville. They paid $150K in TAM, which is now, I guess, GAM after the new CBA. But either way, 150K and then an additional 50,000 based off of possible for performance. So it could be about 200K. You don't spend 200K in GAM or TAM for a guy who's not going to get a lot of minutes, and you're not expecting big things out of. So I think he'll get some minutes there, and he'll do something about it and really start to break out. There's been a lot of talk about him breaking out when he was with Atlanta. He just couldn't get the minutes because he was sitting behind a guy named Joseph Martinez and Tito Villalba and some of the other great attacking talent that Atlanta has. So hopefully this will be the year for him. It's kind of his last chance, right? When you look at it, because between 3 seasons with Atlanta United and Atlanta United 2 in the USL, if he doesn't break out this season with the chances he's going to get for Cincinnati, it probably doesn't bode well for his career, at least not here in the United States. So those guys, I think, will break out a little bit more than Gutman, but he could definitely prove me wrong, and Gutman could just turn into that guy.
Yeah, and real quick, I just did a quick search on Gutman's background from a club perspective. He came up with the Chicago Fire Youth Academy youth program, played his college soccer for Indiana. What's crazy is, as a defender, he had 20 goals and 90 appearances for the Hoosiers. Like that's
Wow.
crazy. That just tells you how good Indiana was. So he was on the Fire roster in 2016, or Chicago FC United, excuse me. So, which is a local USL 2 team here in Chicago. And then in 2019, he moved to Celtic over in the UK, and then was going to get loaned right back to an MLS team, and I think it was Cincinnati. But the league nixed it because it was almost like an end around that, okay, Chicago can't sell him to Cincinnati, or there's some barrier there, so let's just sell him to an international team who will loan him right back. That's what it looked like to the MLS. So they nixed the deal. He ended up going to the Charlotte Independence for most of 2019, and now he is with FC Cincinnati. So that was kind of the circuitous route that Gutman took to get to the MLS. And as we put down in our projected starting 11, hopefully it pays off for him, because we have him starting as a right back for FC Cincinnati when the season does kick off. So to continue on with the starting 11, Gutman, Vanderwerf, Waston, and DePlane are projected starting defenders. Taking a step back, Teton is in goal for FC Cincinnati. We've got Cruz, Regatin, and Medunjanin in the midfield, and then your strikers or offensive wingers there, Kubo, Lacadia, and Vasquez. So, Mike, tell me why you went with a 4-3-3 for this formation.
Yeah, so I went with the same formation that they were using at the end of last season. We've kind of been staying consistent with all the team previews we've been doing to go that route, because it changes, so with a lot of these teams, not as much by Ron Jans as some other coaches like Frank DeBoer or Mark DeSantos. But, going with the 4-3-3, that's what they played last year. It could be some changes, or at least the end of last season last year. There could be some changes, especially trying to improve on the season that they had. But that's kind of what we're going with, just based off of consistency. And I really think that you're going to see a good attack out of this team. I mean, that's you look at, if Regaton turns out to be anything, having him and Medunjanin in the midfield, feeding the ball to Kubo, Locadia, Brandon Vasquez, if he does break out like we're expecting him to break out, that's going to be a really good attack. The defense they've got the names. I mean, as you say, Vanderwerf, Waston, Nick Haglin's a good player that's going to come off the bench. He can score some goals and get in the air just like Waston can. DePlain played well last season. Gutman has a chance to become a really good player. So there's definitely a good amount of talent on this club. However, when you're coming off a season like you did last year and you're still fairly new in the league, anything can happen, right? So really the thought process for me, as far as how this team could do prediction wise, is the ceiling. I think this team could be a playoff team. I really do. I think in the East you've got your leaders at the top. You've got your Toronto FC, New York City, Atlanta. Those guys are firmly up in the top echelon of the Eastern Conference. And then from 4 through about 10, you're going to have a lot of fighting space. Your DC Uniteds, your New York Red Bulls, Columbus Crews, New England Revolutions, FC Cincinnati's, Montreal Impacts, since the Chicago Fire. All those guys are going to be grouped into that spot. And I think if all goes well, and you could see Cincinnati in that playoffs, probably not hosting a game. I think the 5th seed being an away game, that's probably the best case scenario for Cincinnati. The floor, I can't see this team going back as bad as they were last season. I think they will improve year over year for sure. And I've got the floor as the 10th seed. Nick, what are your thoughts on how their season may or may not play out?
No, you're right. The way that I kind of look at it is you've got the teams in each conference who are competing for trophies and who could win their respective conferences. Like you said, New York City, Atlanta are the first two that come to mind in the East. Then you've got the guys who are going to make the playoffs. Teams like DC, Columbus has really kind of reloaded this year. New York, the New England Revolution, Red Bulls, consistent playoff teams. And then you've got that kind of third tier of everyone else who's just fighting to get into those last few playoff spots. That's to me where Cincinnati falls. So if all goes well for them, yeah, they get that 5th seed. If things fall apart, if they can't improve, they've turned over the roster. If it still doesn't work, because hey, last year we said they were going to score goals too. So I don't know if we're saying the same thing here again, Mike. It's deja vu all over again. If it all falls apart and goes the same as last year, then yeah, you're looking at the 10th seed as the top scenario here. But we're going to find out how they fare. Their first game is March 1st at Red Bull Arena, a really good opponent to kind of start the season with, a good Eastern Conference measuring stick, and another team who's looking to rebound after a subpar season last year. So it'll be a great home opener on March 1st for the Red Bulls against this kind of revamped FC Cincinnati squad.